And we are live on the Gamification Revolution. Welcome, everybody. It's been a couple of weeks since I've seen you all. I've missed you so much. I'm your host, Gabe Zickerman. And with me today is the lovely and talented and amazing and brilliant Stella Grizont. Hi, Stella.
Hi.
Okay, so Stella,
Yes.
we haven't had you on the show for a year, and I'm so excited to catch up with you. And for those of you who are regular watchers of the show, you'll remember Stella from a while back, and also Stella was a great speaker at Gamification Summit this past year. Amazing, amazing. As always, you can join in the conversation by logging in with one of your social media accounts. You can click the button to log in here on Spreecast, and then you can actually join the effervescent chat that's taking place in the live chat room in parallel to our conversation. And once you're in here, once you've actually logged in with your accounts, you can ask us questions. And I'm sure you're going to have some questions because many of the things that we say are worthy of analysis or further retort. You can ask questions by either hitting the question button, which is somewhere on your screen, and typing it in, and we'll get to it. Or if you actually have a camera on your phone, on your computer, you click the camera button, and we can actually bring you live, and you can be right here with the two intrepid people in blue today. And we did not coordinate this in
We
advance,
did
right? We
not.
promised.
We promise.
Okay, so, Stella, it's been a while since we've had you on the show, and I know lots of things have changed in your life. You're now in Oakland, and you're married, and all these things are so amazing. Okay, but what's new and exciting for you in the kind of professional capacity?
Oh my God. Well, so much. We just launched a Udemy course. So now people who've been trying to work with woopaah but haven't been able to meet us in person, now they can learn about the science of happiness and well-being online. It's an awesome 5-week course. It takes them through how to get through a shitty day, how to make struggle into meaning, how to just be in the flow, which is so important for anyone who's into gamification. We break down what is flow and how to get into it, and how to deepen your relationships. So I'm excited about that. And we launched an online game too. So we gamified happiness, which we,
Okay, and I want to talk about that. I
yeah,
want to talk about that in 1 second.
yeah,
Let's go back to the Udemy course for a second.
yeah.
Okay, the science of happiness. Why do we care about the science of happiness?
Oh my God. It is everything. I mean, it is the one thing that everyone needs to learn because it is what charges our entire experience. If we don't understand the levers to what makes us thrive, then we're not we're not living to we're not living to our utmost capacity. We're not performing to our utmost capacity. We're not loving to our utmost capacity. So really understanding your own buttons is kind of like, it's 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 like devastating to me that we don't learn this in school. That the science just started like 20 so years ago. I mean, there's been studies before, but a formal science has only started 20 years ago to answer questions that like poets and philosophers have been like, struggling with for thousands of years. So we have to care because it's what makes it's what's the point of life if we're not really living it?
You can't help but smile when you talk about things like this. I want to connect the dots though to more think about it through a more professional prism.
Yeah.
So there's definitely the personal journey that we all are on for happiness, and I think and definitely I'm one of those people who likes to master that through science. Like I like to actually understand that through the prism of how does it work and what the mechanisms are.
Yeah.
Can you talk to why this course or understanding happiness might be important to people who, for example, are tasked with designing engagement systems in a workplace or for marketing for consumers?
Absolutely. Well, we talk about a few things that are extremely relevant to work life. First, we talk about engagement and how boredom. We give some science on boredom. A lot of people take boredom as just like something that happens that we have to accept. That's just what happens when we're at work. Um, but no, I mean, in fact, boredom actually it really kills you. It literally shortens your lifespan. in addition to like really cutting off your ability to take on bigger challenges, to really be engaged. So we talk about the science of boredom, and then we talk about engagement, and we break down the elements of flow by Csikszentmihalyi, which I'm, sure you guys have covered, you know, in depth. But for anyone who doesn't know, the state of flow is that state of being totally immersed in the task at hand. It's like losing yourself to what it is that you're doing, losing sense of time and space. So we break down the mechanics of flow, and that's really critical when you're in a work environment because you need to have very specific goals. You need to have instant feedback. You need to be able to have a channel of focus, which is really hard if you're pulling people into meetings all the time and not allowing them to have a certain amount of time to really stay focused on their task. So we talk about the mechanics of flow. We also talk about engagement. We also talk about motivation and intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. So a lot of us are performing and doing things that we don't realize are motivated by things outside of us, like money, like status, like getting approval by someone. So those things, there's no good or bad in where you're motivated. It's just that you are more likely to sustain performance if you are intrinsically motivated, meaning the motivation comes from within, that you're you're interested, you're passionate about what it is that you're doing. We see a lot of burnout.
Yeah. Do you think, just to kind of, there's a sort of interesting conversation going on here about introverts and extroverts. So not extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, which we talked about a lot, and I think is a great subject that we could talk about, all day.
Yeah.
But what about people's actual social orientation and the effect on happiness? Do we need to know if people are introverts or extroverts, when we're designing experiences to try to engage them?
Hmm.
And how does that affect happiness?
That's a good question.
I have a hypothesis while
I
you're
want to hear
processing it
yours.
for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. Tell me.
Yeah. So there's this interesting kind of science about the dopamine relationship with introversion and extroversion.
Yeah.
So one of the theories about why they exist is that uh, extroverts are more dopamine resistant, which is to say they need more dopamine in order to feel happy.
Yeah.
So they get a lot of that from their outside interactions with people, but they need more of that to get that dopamine rush from interactivity.
Uh-huh.
And people who are introverted are highly dopamine sensitive, which means they have a lot of receptors to dopamine, and it doesn't take much to get their dopamine triggers hit,
Yeah.
right? This prevailing theory also, I think, explains some amount of the way we see kind of intense video game play being associated with an introverted, with an introverted orientation, in the sense of how it plays into people's sort of dopamine receptors and pushes them and moves them along in kind of a powerful way. So one thing that I often think about is, if we're dealing with a big pile of extroverts, we definitely need to create experiences that are more dopaminergic, richer in feedback and interactions, and especially socializing. Whereas when we're dealing with introverts, we don't need to give them probably as much of that stimulus in order to make them happy.
Absolutely. And you'll find that introverts will probably shut down at a certain point because it's just too much. So and also there's, whenever we're designing anything with the intention of engagement, you have to make sure that people feel safe, to start. So absolutely, I've discovered that I'm more of an introvert. I'm an introvert. So I mean, I don't first of all, I just don't like these like labels. There's a continuum, but I recognize that I'm more of an introvert than I ever thought. And so there's a little bit of awareness and education too, because sometimes aren't sometimes people will find themselves checking out of a certain situation, not realizing, not because there's just not that self-awareness. So having the self-awareness of your energetic disposition, whether you're introverted or extroverted, or what it is that you need in order to step into an activity or work and be engaged, I think it that's really important. I really, this is cool. This is interesting. I haven't been thinking about the introvert extrovert
You know,
thing. Yeah.
so you take a very specific approach to thinking about these questions. You're very interested in, and have been for a long time, in positive psychology and happiness. And I mentioned your G Summit talk. For those of you who haven't seen it, you can check out our YouTube channel at Gamification Co. on YouTube, and check out Stella's amazing talk, or just type in Stella G Summit into Google. Oh no, in fact, we actually have here the link for it, so you don't even have to go searching for it. The link to your great talk at G Summit. And Sasha echoed my feelings about that in the chat and said it was a fantastic talk, and I agree with you. How did you become interested in the subject of happiness? What and positive psychology, and why do you think it's been important to you, and what lessons can people take away from your particular interest in the subject matter?
Uh, I've always been like fascinated by the human experience, probably motivated by struggle, like, man, like this is really hard. Why am I feeling this way? What can I do about it? Or um, I was, I mean, I'm still very ambitious, but as a high school, in college, I mean, I would just get lost in like the business aisle of like, how to be productive, how to be a leader, um, and so I was always interested in how to grow, and that's where it started. It's like, how do you grow? Because there's always more there's to be and to do, and so but my formally I stumbled upon positive psychology one day, actually by accident. I was having it was my birthday. I was waiting for the train in Brooklyn. I was having a horrible birthday so far. I was really depressed. Had like a fight with my boyfriend at the time, and my friend called me and she said, "Happy birthday." And I was like, ugh, I'm having a horrible day. And she sent me this email and to cheer me up. And the email was a story about a guy, and Gabe, you can cut me off if I'm getting too long-winded, but the story was about,
Go ahead.
okay, so the story was about this guy in a taxi cab, and in a taxi, and someone hit his taxi, and the taxi driver got out to talk with the guy who hit him, and the guy who hit him was like raging and being this total asshole, and the taxi driver was like really collected and calm, and they exchanged information. He just got back in the cab and started driving. The passenger was like, "Oh my God, how could you just stay so calm? That guy was a total asshole." And he said, "You know what? People are often like garbage trucks. They're looking for a place to like dump their garbage." And for me, that message really clicked because I was working at the time at a startup. I was getting thousands of messages about what wasn't working, and I was feeling really responsible for all the things that were going wrong, even though they were out of my control. And what I realized is that so I just like that message really resonated, and I looked and I was like, who wrote this? This is like such an awesome post. And I looked at this guy's name, and he like had a degree from Yale, and then a business degree, and then a master's in applied positive psychology. And I was like, oh my God, like what is positive psychology? That sounds perfect. And so I called him up, and then like a year later, I was in the program. So
Awesome.
I've always been,
Why?
yeah,
So one thing that we've observed about good kind of engagement design or gamification design, at least I've observed it, is that people who are good at it, I often get asked the question, what does it take to be good at this? And the first thing I say is you have to be really curious about the human condition.
yeah,
Like we're sort of like we're out there on the front end, really absorbing a lot of information about how the brain works and how we interact with other people to design experiences that help people be the best part of themselves. What advice can you give about how to foster that kind of curiosity and creativity without getting totally overwhelmed by all the like immense amount of information that's out there?
Mm. Well, I think that it begins with a level of, I mean, curiosity is key, and it's when, if you can begin by just being present with wherever, it really begins with mindfulness, because when you are aware, and if you're in the present moment and you're aware of all the thoughts that are flying past you, like, um, if you can just watch those thoughts, and stay in the moment, and be an observer of your experience and an observer of others, what happens is that you generate a space. And it's in that space where I find questions, and that's where the curiosity is, because it's like, isn't that interesting? That person is like being, he's really angry right now, or he's competing with me at work right now. Isn't that interesting? Like, you don't get wrapped up into the experience of what's happening, or like, wow, this person is trying to sabotage, Mary in this meeting. um, so when you can stay present in yourself without judging, like, you're not judging anyone. You just, as soon as you begin to judge, the curiosity gets cut off. It's like, why is this happening? That's really interesting. So instead, when I
So kind of like, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
no, I was just going to say, as soon as I find myself judging, because that's just human nature, um, I try to switch it to like, isn't it interesting that this is happening? What can I learn from it?
So this is a common theme as well, and I think it's definitely a theme in your life, kind of coming to this stage from your own perspective and trying to understand how you work and how the world sort of works around you. Can we, and I want to talk about that, the game that you've made, how can we kind of provoke our users, whether that's our employees or the consumer base that we're trying to talk to, how do we provoke those users to be more curious about themselves?
Um, it
Tough question.
it just depends on the context. And I think it starts with you. I think it starts with you if you're a leader and you're trying to get your employees to be more curious about themselves. You have to first embody what it is that you're trying to share with others. I mean, that's the miss with so many leaders and so many people teaching anything. If you don't embody what it is that you want to share with this world, then it's not transmitting. So if you want people to be more curious, if you want people to be more engaged, then how can you yourself embody that? Which means, you know, being more mindful, asking more questions, sharing maybe stuff that you wouldn't normally share, but that is more authentic. Um, because when you get into the space of being honest and authentic, then, there's, and you make it safe for other people to engage with you or whatever activity is you're trying to create. Um, and there's no worry about being judged or punished, then that's when things get juicy.
So doesn't that kind of so that's really interesting, right? Can we do that in software? What you just described. So Beth wants you to do a daily podcast
I
where you're
just
doing positive affirmations every day.
I just saw that.
I do too. I think many people do. But can that be done in software? Because it's kind of interesting. Many of the things that you talk about are very humanistic things.
Yeah.
But can we convey this idea of judgment-free curiosity and insight and mindfulness? Can that be prompted through software? Can that happen with software?
Yes, that is a really good question. I was reading something in the New York Times. Oh my God, I'm forgetting who wrote it, but he talked about subjective and objective um, decision making, and can technology help us with the subjective kind of humanistic stuff? Um, I think it is possible. It's absolutely possible. I think it's I don't know how. I mean, I've often thought of like creating a web page or something like a confessional, like an online confessional where you can go and you can just share what you're maybe ashamed of or scared of, or, whatever's going on, and you can uh-huh.
Yeah, there was a thing called Post Secret that was quite popular in the 2000s. That was
Oh,
sort of a catharsis
I
of,
didn't even know about that.
yeah,
That's cool. Yeah.
yeah. People just mailed in postcards, and it was kind of cathartic, and you could sort of say anything that you want. And Michael Finney actually just talked about Calm, which is an app for the iPhone. I use that. It's a meditation app that kind of uses gamification to encourage you to kind of meditate on a regular basis and be mindful. I think there's a bunch of effort being done on mindfulness, but I think there's a kind of more holistic thing that you're talking about also, which is about positive psychology and the opportunity to be introspective and view the world through a non-judgmental prism, which is interesting. Do you want to talk about that game that you've been working on that you mentioned at the beginning? And you and I could talk all day long, so I want to make sure that we get to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So for anyone so Happify, I don't know, Gabe, if you've heard of Happify, but they just launched, and they asked me to create a game for them on their platform. So essentially, they have a series of games that help you move through positive psychology learnings in a gamified experience. So I designed a game that's all about getting unstuck. And I actually was inspired to create this game after the talk I did for at the G Summit, because I wanted to break it down for people. Yeah. So
Cool.
so if you heard that talk, I basically like gamified it, and you have like a month of activities that you can do um, to help you really learn about yourself and how to get unstuck and how to see more possibilities. So, in that respect, technology can definitely enable us to, embody uh, these principles. And I think it also, you know, the human aspect happens because it's like you and me right now are talking. That's like human, and it's not, you know, it we can use technology to share, transmit um, the messages that matter. I get so much inspiration.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you, but I think there's also another role for technology in all of this in my mind. And one of it is that, especially if we're talking about a workplace environment,
Yeah.
lots of stuff that you talk about, I think if we surveyed managers and we said, is it important to be positive? We probably would see a majority, certainly younger managers, say, yes, that's important. And I want to be positive. But just like with parents, it's hard for people to be perfect.
Oh,
And it's hard for them in the moment when they've got 40 people to manage and a P&L and their boss is yelling at them and all this kind of stuff, to be their better selves and not take the route of like, you messed up and and I have to say for myself, mea culpa, like the team that works with me knows, I talk about all this stuff. I'm not perfect. I try to be good at, being positive. It's not always possible. Sometimes I'm fed up or I'm tired or I'm traveling around the world and I have 2 seconds or whatever. So part of the role, I think, of technology is actually to allow us to kind of program in our best possible self
uh,
so that in the moment, computer doesn't get stressed out in the moment. So it doesn't care how stressful the situation is. It's going to provide that same experience to us regardless of, how it's feeling because it's not really feeling. So I feel
I
like also
love
when
that.
when we're trying to create safe spaces, right? So also for safe spaces, it allows us to do that. So
Yeah.
even like as you're working on this game, why did you want to make this gamified version of being unstuck? Why did you think that was important?
Why was it important for me to create that?
Yeah, why did you decide to do it? Yeah.
Because I wanted to share. I wanted to share, and I also valued the conditions of gamifying because it keeps people on track. It gives them instant feedback. It also gives them a sense of community where they can share stories. I mean, talk about humanistic experience and feeling safe. You have people sharing as they go through these different exercises, like, you know, what they were challenged with, what they're grateful for. And it's like I can get lost reading these comments for hours because it's it's so it's so powerful to see what other people are going through. So in that respect, and I love what you said about the technology doesn't judge you. I think in most cases, some people can design it to judge you, which I don't like, with
Of course.
depending on what kind of feedback they give you. But I really like that. And I also think that technology can do a much better job of keeping you accountable sometimes, with timeliness and feedback, which is really hard to get from a human sometimes. It's also very costly. So it really it really helps in that respect too.
So, so one of the things that I've been doing over the last couple of months is, and Sasha has a funny comment about a to-do list that yells at you when you don't get stuff done. And it's funny because Ivan's pointing out there's actually a whole bunch of gamification examples based on kind of negative psych that I often talk about. I think are crazy bad,
Yeah.
just incredibly, incredibly irritating. Stick is a famous one for trying to get behavior change from negative reinforcement. It makes me insane every time I look at it. And one of the things, so tying this all together, so in the last 2 months, I've been on this tour called G Summit Global. We traveled all around the world. I went to like 12 different places in Israel and India and in Dubai and did these workshops and G Summit events all over the place to try to, to try to engage with folks and teach them the mechanics of gamification. Our last one will be in Sao Paulo in January. So if you happen to be in Brazil in mid-January or South America, come join us there. But one of the interesting things that I was thinking about is all this stuff that we're talking about right now, Stella, people around the world would listen to us and say, this is so American. This is this idea that we have to be like unfailingly positive and upbeat and try to give this positive reinforcement. This is so American. Okay, what do you think about the intercultural and global questions about kind of your work? How do we put happiness and hacking for happiness and the science of positive psychology in a global context?
Great point. And here's where I think America has gone wrong, is the expectation that you're supposed to be happy all the effing time. No, you're not. Like, in fact, the area of positive psychology and the stuff that I am most passionate about is how do you deal with the negative positively? Because no one's fucking talking about that. It's like, it's important to acknowledge the reality of what you're going through. So if you are in a really shitty mood, pretending like you're not, in some studies actually, faking it, they say helps, but you first have to acknowledge where you're at. And so I think what a lot of Americans do, and we see this with antidepressant usage being the number one drug among Americans age 12 and up. And antidepressants usage has increased 400% since like the 1988 or something. It's ridiculous. And I think a reason for that is because we have this expectation that we're supposed to be happy all the time. And when you're not and you don't know what to do with it, then you begin to punish yourself. And so you're experiencing like a double whammy of feeling bad because you're feeling bad about feeling bad. And so I think that in some respects, as Americans, we have a lot. I love the emphasis on positivity, but we also need to acknowledge, how do we deal with the negative in a positive way? And I have never said this out loud in a public setting, and I also don't feel like I've studied this enough or looked into it but when you look at all of these like shootings that are happening or the kids who are playing knockout or whatever it's called where they go and they just hit people for fun, you know, for me, and this is again just my personal insight, I'm not saying that This is like a globalized thing. But for me, what that indicates is that we do not know how to deal with our negative emotions. We don't know how to deal with boredom because, you know, a lot of people are looking for a feeling of being alive and a feeling of being in charge of their lives. And we just don't know how to deal with when shit hits the fan. So, you know, that's actually a big reason why I designed the Being Stuck and why I designed the Science of Happiness course, is because I want to create a dialogue for people on how to deal when, you know, stuff doesn't feel good, because there is a positive approach to it. And I think that's,
And
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's the shadow side of America's approach to happiness. Yeah.
And you know, and there's nobody I would rather see cast light into that shadow than you, Stella Grizont. Thanks for being with us on Gamification Revolution. You can follow Stella at Stella Grizont. Her on Twitter, her handle is down below for those of you viewing us live. For everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. Whether you're here with us live and chat every week, Thursdays, 1 o'clock Eastern, to talk about the gamification revolution, engaging employees and consumers. Please join us live. Otherwise, you can watch in absentia or time shifted at gamification.co. Catch the videos there on our YouTube channel. I'm Gabe Zickerman. You can follow me on Twitter at gzickerman. Thanks again, Stella. Hopefully we'll see you and everybody else soon.
Gabe, one more thing, one more thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
For anyone who's watching this, I want to give them a code for my class if they want to take it.
Oh.
So
yeah, what's the code for your class?
I'm gonna let's make the code Gabe. I'm gonna make it as soon as we get off the phone, and I'm gonna give anyone who's watching this 50% off my class. I want to get it out there. People need to know this stuff. It's essential. So the code is Gabe, Gabe, and it will be live in like 2 minutes on udemy.com. Just look for the Science of Happiness.
Okay, amazing. Stella, thank you for that from everybody
Thanks.
in the community. Thanks to everyone. We'll see you next week on Gamification Revolution. Keep having fun, everybody. Take care.
Bye.